Greetings and welcome to my channel. This is Sorcerer Tal. You can also find me on Facebook in the Sorcerer's Guild. Today on Magical Theory and Unorthodox Weirdery, we are going to be talking about tricksters, dealing with devils, and the story of Robert Johnson. Okay, so because I don't expect everyone to agree with my definition of a devil, or even necessarily a trickster, I do want to remind you that anything I say on this playlist should not be taken as official guild policy or position on any matter. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get right to it. A trickster is most often seen as a humorous archetype, is a being found within many mythologies, magical, spiritual traditions, and religions throughout the world. The trickster is the being that trips us up on the cracks before our feet so that we do not step into the giant chasms in our life. Okay, so what do I mean by that? A trickster is the being that reveals the jokes in our reality and our lives. Yeah? In the previous video on Fenords, I defined a joke as a storyline whose conclusion makes us realize we were misunderstanding part of the premise of the story the whole time. Yeah? So a trickster is a revealer of Fenords, the hidden truths within our lives, within reality, existence, the society around us. It is trickster that reveals these things to us. Now, trickster isn't always seen as a positive archetype, yeah? Because often when someone is telling a joke, there is someone who is a butt of that joke. So we need to be mindful of this when dealing with trickster and not try to resist the truths that trickster reveals to us. Because that's a pretty good setup for a joke, yeah? A truth that you're refusing to acknowledge, then coming around and biting you in some way. A lot of irony in that. A lot of times, if we resist trickster, we're going to find ironic consequences to that. But also, you want to be mindful that you understand the truths that are revealed to you. Because, pretty good joke there too, in misunderstandings. I mean, that's one of the most common tropes in sitcoms, a simple misunderstanding of a communication. So we want to make sure that we understand. And we want to be mindful of the things that trickster tells us so that we don't wind up the butt of the joke when we are dealing with or under the influence of trickster, of any type of trickster being. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't intentionally work with trickster, but we should be mindful of what we are doing. Trickster can be used to reveal hidden truths and to help us bring on enlightenment within ourselves, to help us bring on understanding of the self, or to understand things around us. But again, with trickster, it can be pretty intense. It's like there's a meme circulating on Facebook. It says, what I think enlightenment is, and it's all happy and cheery. I forget exactly what the image looks like, but then underneath that it says what it really is, and it's someone laying in a bed freaking out and like, am I going crazy? Okay, that can sometimes be the case with trickster. So we need to be mindful of what we are doing. We need to understand that it isn't always necessarily going to be a pleasant process. Yeah, humor is often awkward. It is often strange. Sometimes humor is very dark. We need to realize that when we are dealing with this type of being, and not summon a trickster for minor reasons, for small things. This is something that when we deal with a trickster, we need to consider what we are doing. And we need to be respectful, but also wary, and caution isn't the right word. We want to be very mindful, very thought out in what we are doing when we are dealing with a trickster type being. Now, this, of course, is to lesser and greater degrees depending on what being you're working with, but tricksters can often be trusted to do what they say. Yeah? Often exactly what they say, and that might be where the humor comes in if you strike a deal with a trickster spirit. I wouldn't suggest, some people think of these trickster spirits as someone to go to for curse work. I don't suggest that. Yeah? That seems to me like you are asking for it. If you are trying to do some negative work on someone else with a trickster type spirit, like I said, they tend to have a large joy of irony. They seem to favor irony, so I wouldn't suggest that. Perhaps if it's a David and Goliath type situation, like actually if you are trying to affect a large corporation or political person, politics in general, humor is actually a great way to go there, yeah? And dealing with trickster spirits in that context is a great idea. But I wouldn't try and curse my neighbor, if you were going to want to curse your neighbor for some reason, with a trickster spirit. Yeah? Especially like, you know, your go away spell, something like that, to get rid of a neighbor you don't like. I wouldn't suggest using trickster there. There's going to be some ironic consequence in the end. Okay, so now that we've talked about tricksters, let's go on to devils. Let's go on to the concept of devils. Now, the first thing I want to get out of the way is that I'm not talking about the Christian concept of the devil. Yeah, they got this idea of a guy with pointed horns and cloven hooves, and, well, they're just demonizing Pan. That really is what they're doing, yeah? And I suppose Pan is sometimes seen as a trickster spirit in some cases, but either way, a trickster and a devil are not the same thing, okay? And I'm not talking about the Christian devil, the devil. I'm talking about devils. Now, I define a devil as a created being that is created by a concentration of negative energy, often from a negative event. Okay, we talk about ghosts that are created like at murder scenes, and I'm not talking about necessarily about the ghost itself. Yeah, like if the murderer gets trapped there, the victim gets trapped there and becomes twisted, or even if you have a water spirit, like in my hoarder video, I have that water spirit that got twisted when it got involved in that woman's traumatic brain injury and different things that happened on the property. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about even there, because those were beings that were created beforehand. When I'm talking about a devil, I'm talking about a being that is created by a negative event. It is the tulpa of that moment, or servitor. It is, sometimes things happen that are so negative that it creates a thought form, yeah? And that thought form evolves into a devil. A really good example of this is within the mythology that I was taught as a child. My great-grandfather talked about these two trees called the devil trees. And they weren't the trees themselves, but the devils resided in the trees from a massacre that had occurred, that my tribe committed upon another tribe a very long time ago. Yeah, the Mississauga Ojibwe. Anyways, I don't want to get into that, but this incident, one of the things it created were these devil trees, and they weren't the victims of that moment, but the thought form that was created from the massacre itself resided in these trees. And devils are always bad. Yeah, that's part of the definition of a devil when I am speaking of devils in this term. Now, like I said, I don't expect everyone to accept my definition of a devil. We have people in the guild that practice Demonaltry. I'm not actually honestly sure how that word's pronounced. To be honest, I'm sure I'm probably saying it wrong. That might consider themselves devil worshippers and have some other different idea of it. But for me, a devil is a created being, either created intentionally by a sorcerer in a similar manner to creating any other being, and then used to bedevil people, or this type of being that I'm talking about that is created by these negative events. But one thing as well that devils have in common is the need to feed on energy. The need to feed on human energy. And there's where this idea that the devils are after your soul. Yeah? Okay, is that, yeah, actually. But not your higher self. Not your soul. But in that sense, like your higher self, your spirit, whatever we want to call it. But the upper soul, talking about the lower soul. What while you're alive is called your aura, and after you're dead is called your ka. Yeah, they want pieces of that, pieces of your chi, your energy. And in order to get it, your minor devils will plague you. They will bedevil you. These are like often in hauntings. That's what we're actually dealing with, is some sort of devil that has been created by negative energy, negative emotions. These smaller devils can just be created by someone being sad a lot. A devil actually becomes part of the thought form of that process, and we can help get rid of we can help mitigate sometimes depression if it's caused by these things by removing these devils. Yeah, that's one of the important parts of dealing with devils, is removing them. Like I said, there are ways to intentionally treat these beings, and there are people that work with them. I'm actually not going to get into that, because for me, these particular types of beings, I see a devil, I destroy it. That's what it comes down to. These are beings that, they're a type of parasite that intentionally causes negative energy, or causes negative emotions to feed off of that energy. And yes, if you have access to a devil and send one out to somebody, that can be a quite effective curse. But then you're releasing another one of these beings out into reality that just are going to perpetuate misery. And there's no need for that. Yeah? You can make negative servitors, you make replicating servitors that have a specific task. But these things, they're no good. This is one of the few things that I'm just like, yeah, destroy those things. Destroy the devils. Okay? And so, we can do that with purification, cleansing, banishments, like I have discussed in the past, or even simply breaking apart the patterns of their energy. The selenite rods that I have talked about before. I have a video on how to activate selenite. Yeah, you push that energy out and clear away from these beings. In the coven that I studied under when I was younger, they talked about devil beaters. And this is the idea of chasing out these beings out of things. They would do this with bells and brooms, and you would just basically ring the bell and have sticks, even like these like small curved sticks. I can't remember the name for them at the moment, but you would use these and beat the things. Like you would, if you had a house, you would get the rugs out and beat the rugs and beat the devil out. Yeah? Perhaps you've heard that term before, beating the devil out of things. That's where this idea comes from, is you are just using the energy of the bell and of the brass bell and ringing that and considering that sound a weapon that is just going out to destroy the energy. And like I said, you can use a selenite wand, or even your presence and your sigil. Yeah, your personal sigil can be used as a weapon in these cases, like I said, on that banishment video that I will provide a link to. And you can also use smoke, like sage and stuff like that. Those mostly drive them out. If we get a hold of one of these devils, like I said, we do want to destroy it. You can even just imagine a bolt, a vortex coming out from the hands, rising from the belly, especially if you can pull it up from the belly. I have a video on belly fire. We'll be making more videos on that as the exercise videos start, but you can pull the energy, belly fire, up from the belly into the hands, into the heart chakra and into the hands. And then imagine a vortex of destructive energy coming out and attacking and consuming the devil, breaking apart that energy and making their energy become part of the vortex. Like I said, these are created beings. So really, you just need to envision destroying them. Some of them are stronger than others, depending on how long they've been about and what caused them. But like I said a little while ago, these thought forms can actually be caused from depression itself. So if you are struggling with depression, of course, sometimes, yes, it is your brain. This isn't something to replace your meds necessarily or your daily meditations. But these things can become attached to you like any other parasite if you are suffering negative emotions. So doing a purification and a banishment might be helpful to you. Yeah? And doing occasional devil hunts and beating the devil out of perhaps your pillow. Yeah? Even if it's just symbolic. These ideas can help. So take your broom, beat the crap out of your pillow, and beat the devil out of it. Yeah? Perhaps it'll help. Okay. And so as I said, these devils, in a way, are after your soul. Yeah? After bits of your soul. So that brings us to the story of Robert Johnson. Okay, now, if you're unfamiliar with Robert Johnson is a blues player from way back in the day. And the rumor is that Robert Johnson went to the crossroads to sell his soul to the devil. Yeah? That's the story. There's a documentary on Netflix about it even. There's a couple stories about this. Even in, he died at 27. Supposedly all these rock stars are dying at that age because of similar deals with the devil down at the crossroads. Okay? So anyways, the story I want to tell you about Robert Johnson is that I was watching that very documentary on Netflix. And I had just recently come across a candle for Eshu here. And I just began contact. Now, I will say this about the concept of closed traditions. Yeah, because Eshu is a being from like Ifa. And he's also, I believe, in Palomayombe, however that's pronounced. I'm probably massacring that word too. I'm great at mispronouncing words. Anyways, a lot of people say that these are closed practices, and I will say this about that. Eshu is not a being to be trifled with, yeah? And that's kind of what this story is about. But at the same time, if you find yourself being contacted by these beings, I don't think it's wise to turn them away. And now, what Eshu is, he's one of the gatekeepers. Yeah, he's one of the ones that have the key to the crossroads. He opens the way to the other side. So he's a being that you would contact at the beginning of a spell to open the way. And open the crossroads. Even if you're working with another being in Hoodoo, Ifa, you're going to be contacting, or Voodoo, you're going to be contacting one of these crossroads keepers, like Legba in Voodoo or Ilegua in Santeria. There are a couple different names. I believe they're all different beings that hold keys for that. But that's a different video, really. This is a story about Robert Johnson and Eshu in particular. Okay, so I'm watching this documentary about Robert Johnson. I just barely began contact with Eshu. And as I'm watching the documentary, all of a sudden, I started getting another story in my head, yeah? And it's a contact from Eshu. Now, you can choose to believe this story or not, but as I'm watching this, I get the story from Eshu's side, yeah? And that's what I have agreed to talk about here now. Okay, so this Robert Johnson goes down to the crossroads, and he wants to be famous, yeah? He goes down there, and he had a little bit of hoodoo experience. So he had means to contact Eshu, but he'd been told that he was going to go down there and talk to the devil of the crossroads, yeah? So he goes down there, and he starts playing his guitar, trying to play the guitar down at the crossroads, and summons Eshu. But then he starts talking Eshu, calling him a devil, telling him he'll give him his soul. You know, and he's just essentially disrespecting this gatekeeper. He's referring to him as evil and an abomination, and that he's going to do something, and that he has ill intent. And so, with a lot of these beings, especially a being like Eshu, if you come to him representing him a certain way, like you come to him like he's treating him a certain way, well, he's liable to give you what you're asking for, yeah? And so Robert Johnson comes down here to the crossroads asking for the devil. Eshu decided to give it to him. Okay? Right? So now it isn't to play the guitar that Robert Johnson went down to the crossroads. Robert Johnson wanted to be famous, yeah? And so Eshu takes this deal. Now, I want to talk about this idea for a moment of selling your soul. Now, like I said, there's this energy that these devils wanted in the last example, but there's more things than just devils that want that energy. Yeah, it's still fuel, it's still food, it's still power. In fact, we haven't talked much about sacrifice in any of my videos, but you see, when you sacrifice an animal, if someone sacrifices an animal, we talk about the blood, but it's not the blood, it's the energy within that blood that is completely given away at that moment, that release, that soul. But like I said, it's not your upper soul, it's not your higher self, it's your lower soul, that ka. And that's, if you do find a way to, that is the part that there are beings that are interested in that part. Now, if you lose that, you've essentially, you're not trading like I said, you're not trading your higher self and your true free will, your actual you. What you are trading is the you now. Yeah? Whoever you are, this lifetime. Because a lot of that is stored up in that ka. And so if you leave and something else takes that, what you've lost is all the energy you build up in this lifetime. All the memories, perhaps even, of this life. Your ka, or ghost, that is left behind in your body, that's what they're taking. Yeah? Okay, but that's still not exactly what happened with Robert Johnson. He was being ridden. Okay? And being ridden hard. Because he shows up and he starts summoning the spirit saying, I want to be famous. If you can make me famous. He starts, he tells Eshu, if you can make me famous, you can have my soul. Well, he wants to enter in. Yeah, well, that's what Eshu really wants, is to enter in, to ride this person. And so, that's what happens. Robert Johnson gets up on stage, And he did have them long fingers, man. You ever seen the pictures of Robert Johnson? He's got them long fingers, man. He was built to play the guitar with hands like that. But Eshu gets inside of him, and it's Eshu that's playing the guitar, yeah? He's actually being ridden. And that's why he can suddenly play so well. Because it's not Robert Johnson that can play. It's Eshu. And yeah, Robert Johnson learns to play by having his hands ridden. And he becomes these things. But then you hear all these stories about what happens with Robert Johnson, about him barking like a dog in his last days and all these crazy things that he did. It's because, well, Eshu was in there playing a role. Robert Johnson said, "I want the devil." You know, and even in Robert Johnson's songs, he talk about me and the devil. Yeah, and how they're the same person. It's because Eshu jumped inside. And Eshu was just in there, part of him all the time, but in this role. And that's how he eventually dies, is that his ka breaks apart. Yeah, his soul that he promised to Eshu loses its tether. And they say there was poison, yeah, in that glass that he drinks. Well, maybe there was. But that was just the vehicle. If there was, that was just the vehicle or the vessel of that final moment of the breaking. Yeah? And so, the point of that story is, you don't trifle with spirits, yeah? You don't go around calling things devils that ain't devils. And I have a video about rapport, about how it's important to strike rapport with spirits. Yeah, well, this is about respect. Don't be going down to the crossroads and calling people devils that ain't devils. They might choose to fulfill that role. And in my advice, don't work with devils, period. But that doesn't mean you can't work with the keepers of the crossroads, who some people see as tricksters as well. And maybe there's some truth to that, especially with Eshu and some beings like that. They're going to show you some hidden truths about yourself if you start working with them. But if they come to you, then it's fine to work with tricksters. But be mindful. And be respectful. Like I said, it's a lot of this with any spirit. It's about working with respect. But if Eshu comes to you, don't call him a devil. Don't trifle with him. Give him the respect he deserves as who he is. Okay, so that'll be it for this episode. Thank you once again for joining us. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please take the opportunity to do so now. And until next time, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.